This new Skoda Elroq is a fantastic electric SUV that could make quite a lot of other cars seem a bit ridiculous because it's great up front and very spacious in the back. It's got a brilliant range, it's comfortable and great to drive, and it is thousands of pounds cheaper than loads of its rivals. So this looks like yet another Skoda that ticks all the right boxes, but there is one potential problem for this car. Keep watching till the end to find out what that is. And if you want to see lots more new car reviews like this, make sure you subscribe to our channel. Now, this car should have a very broad appeal because it kind of sits between two big groups of rivals. And that's because it's slightly bigger than things like the Volvo EX30, the Smart #1 and the Kia EV3, but it's still slightly smaller than things like the Renault Scenic, Tesla Model Y and the closely related Skoda Enyaq. Now sometimes if a car is in that position, it can lie in a bit of a no man's land without much of a market because it's typically more expensive than the smaller options, but then not as practical as the bigger ones. But this definitely isn't stingy on space. You get 470 litres in the boot of the Skoda Elroq, which is way bigger than what you find in a Volvo EX30 and a Smart #1, and just about bigger than the practical Kia EV3, although it is less than what you'll find in the back of a Scenic. For some context, we could fit 6 carry-on size suitcases below the parcel shelf into the boot of this Elroq, which is the same number we could get in an EV3. A Renault Scenic can fit 7 and an Enyaq can fit 9, so that boot is quite a bit bigger than this. But for even more context, a Smart #1 can fit just 3 suitcases in the back. Unfortunately, you don't get a front boot with the Elroq, which is a shame because lots of other rivals do offer that. But if you add the reasonably priced transport package, as we would recommend you do, then you get a really handy net under the parcel shelf here to store the charging cables, and you also get a height adjustable boot floor. But even without that, you still have some underfloor storage space, which is also another spot where you can put the charging cables. And in the back here you can see you've got this nifty shelving setup and some hidden hooks as well. And if you want even more space than what's on offer here, you can of course fold down the rear seats. They split fold 60-40, not 40-20-40, but you do still get a ski hatch. It's in the rear seats where the Elroq really impresses, because even if you're over 6 foot tall, you'll be able to sit back here very comfortably because legroom is fantastic. Headroom is also particularly brilliant, and even if you're sat in this middle seat, yes, it is raised up slightly compared to the other two, but because headroom really is so good, you will still be very comfortable even if you're a tall adult. You might look at this plastic storage thing though and think, well, that's a shame that it robs a bit of foot space, but you can remove it completely if you wish to reveal a pretty much flat floor, which is also great. And if no one is sat in this middle seat, you can fold down the armrest here, and you can even fold out these additional cup holders. Although, like the ones in the front, these are a bit on the small side, aren't they? But still, overall, in the back here, this, especially because this isn't like it's a huge car on the road, is very, very good, even for adults sat in the back. So there are rivals that have even bigger boots than this, but this is still very, very practical. So unless you absolutely have to have even more load space than what's on offer here, it does make you wonder why you would go for an Enyaq or any of those other slightly bigger rivals, because this is so much cheaper than all of them. Pricing for the Elroq starts at around £31,500. The cheapest Model Y you can buy is about £45,000. An equivalent Skoda Enyaq is about £6,000 more than an Elroq. But you maybe might expect a price gap between this and those slightly bigger rivals. What you might not expect is that this can cost less than lots of the smaller rivals that it's up against, like the Volvo EX30 and the Kia EV3. So what's the catch? Does the Elroq have a terrible interior? Well, no, it doesn't at all, because in here it is very similar to the much more expensive Enyaq inside. And so in that car, that has a very nice interior. So to get virtually the same layout for less cash means this is really impressive. And the good things to point out are the fact that up here on the dashboard, this isn't just a cheap, hard, nasty plastic. This has a soft touch finish, as it does on top of the doors here. And if you go for the entry-level loft design option, then you get this fabric covering on the dashboard with contrast stitching. And you can also, on some of the higher trim levels, go for the lodge design pack, which then gives you a two-tone finish with some orange seat belts. And there's also the option to go for the sweet design package, which then gives you some leather in the interior as well. Now, the driving position itself in the Elroq is fantastic because you've got a very good view out the front of the car. It's also very good out the back because there's a big rear window, and there's loads of adjustment in the seat and in the steering wheel as well. And it's pretty difficult to block this digital driver display in front of you here, which you can't say of many electric SUVs out there. And this display is so good because it's easy to see, it's got nice graphics, and it's also configurable. So you can decide what information you have in front of you, and it's very easy to cycle through the different options using these buttons on the steering wheel here, which is all very good. Over here, you can see we've got a touchscreen infotainment system, which is positioned nice and high up on the dashboard, which means you don't have to take your eyes too far from the road to be able to see it. And it's also pretty close to the driver, so it's within easy reach as well. The system itself is pretty good and fairly sharp and has nice graphics, but it's ultimately not quite as intuitive and snappy as the setups that you'll find in an EV3 and a Renault Scenic, but it is quite a big step up from something like a Mini Countryman electric. You also get wireless Apple CarPlay and wireless Android Auto as standard, which is great. But if there is one big thing to complain about in this interior, it is the fact that most of the climate controls are on this touchscreen here, which of course is more distracting and fiddly to use than if they were separate physical controls. But that's not completely the end of the world, because at least this bit along the bottom of the screen is permanently visible and it's within easy reach. Plus, you've still got some physical shortcut buttons down here to help with some of the different functions. You've also got a voice command system, but as with most cars, it's pretty hit and miss in terms of how helpful it is. Now, in terms of storage, you've got quite a lot on offer here, because on the center console you've got this big cubby, two cup holders here with this removable partition. You've got a tray for your wireless phone charging, and then underneath the center console there is another storage area. Plus the door bins are a decent size and they're carpeted, and under this big armrest you've got another generous storage compartment as well. So all in all, it is very, very good up here, and it is basically the Enyaq's interior for less money. Now, what about the batteries and the ranges? Well, the cheapest version of the Elroq is the 50, and that gets you a 52 kilowatt hour battery and an official range around about 230 miles. Above that, there's a 60 model, which has a 59 kilowatt hour unit, and that bumps the range up to around 260 miles. Then at the top of the Elroq lineup, there's an 85 model with a 77 kilowatt hour battery and an official range of 360 miles. Now, compared to a Smart #1, the longest range version of that can travel around 280 miles. For an EX30, it's around 290 miles. An EV3 and a Renault Scenic do have greater maximum ranges than the Elroq, but the difference there isn't huge. So the cheapest version of the Elroq doesn't have a particularly amazing range, but it should still be long enough to fit into lots of people's lives. And if you want an Elroq with a bigger range, then you can have one, as long as your budget allows for it. And the battery that you go for also decides the electric motor that you get. But the bigger the battery, the more powerful the car. So we tested the range-topping 85 version of the Elroq, and it covered 0 to 60 miles an hour in 6.2 seconds, which is pretty quick. And the slowest version of the Elroq, which is the 50, can officially do 0 to 62 miles an hour in 9 seconds, which for a family electric SUV like this is still perfectly respectable. The battery you go for also changes the maximum charging rate that the car can accept. So if you go for an Elroq 85, then it will accept 175 kilowatts, and in perfect conditions it can get a 10 to 80% top up in around about half an hour. The 50 and 60 versions do accept slightly slower maximum peak charging rates, but because the batteries are smaller themselves, basically all versions of this car get a 10 to 80% top up in around about the same time. And half an hour for that is fairly good. An area where the Elroq is properly outstanding is on the road, because this is a fantastic car to do some miles in. Even with the standard suspension setup, the ride is comfortable and it really impressively absorbs impacts on the suspension. And it's still nicely tied down so you're not bouncing around all over the place on undulating roads. Now, if you go for an 85 Sportline model, then as an option you can add dynamic chassis control, which is DCC, and that basically means you can adjust how firm the suspension feels through increments on the touchscreen infotainment system. And in its comfiest setting, the ride is plusher than what you have in a Scenic and in a Model Y. And in its firmest setting, body lean is noticeably reduced through corners. But even without all that, the standard car is very comfortable. And it feels more nimble and agile through quick changes of direction than an EV3 and also a Scenic. And the steering is really nicely weighted, very smooth, and the tuning of the accelerator and the brake pedal is also really impressive. So basically, it is just very, very easy to drive this car in a very smooth manner. And it's also really relaxing to be in because of how quiet it is in here. And something else very useful about the Elroq on the road is its incredibly tight turning circle, which at 9.3 meters is tighter than the turning circle of a Skoda Citigo. And this car is about a meter longer than that. And so, the driving experience that the Elroq delivers is pretty luxurious, to be honest, and goes far beyond what you'd expect from something in this price range. And remember, the most expensive Elroq is still cheaper than a whole load of other rivals. But which is the best version of this car? Well, the good thing is you can't really buy a bad one. And so the Elroq that suits you best is going to depend on what kind of range you need and also the budget that you have, of course. But if we have to pick a favourite in terms of the batteries, we reckon the 60 represents the best mix of value and range in the lineup. When it comes to the trim levels, there are 4 to choose from: SE, SEL, Edition and Sportline. Entry-level SE is reasonably well equipped, but it doesn't have much in the way of luxuries, and you can only have it with the smallest 50 battery. If you go for SEL, that is only available with the 60 battery, but it does add a lot of extra kit, like a heated steering wheel, heated front seats, dual zone climate control, and some different driving modes. The top 2 trims above that are both available with either the 60 or the 85. Edition trim is our favourite, adding adaptive cruise control, keyless entry and wireless phone charging on top of everything that SEL gets. Range-topping Sportline gets sportier styling, sport front seats, a powered tailgate and adaptive LEDs, but it's the most expensive, so we think the best value is below that. Even the cheapest version of this car gets lots of standard safety equipment, and even though this hasn't yet been tested by crash safety experts Euro NCAP, given the kit that this gets as standard and also Skoda's reputation, there's every reason to believe that this should be a safe electric SUV. Every Elroq also comes with a 3-year or 60,000 mile warranty, which isn't particularly amazing, and this car is obviously too new to have any specific reliability data for just yet. But what we do know is that Skoda finished mid-table in our latest reliability survey, which is there or thereabouts with its closest rivals. Now, we mentioned at the start of this review that there might just be one problem for the Elroq, and that is the fact that the Kia EV3 exists, because it's available for similar money and it is also an absolutely fantastic electric SUV. In fact, the two cars are very difficult to separate and they share many of the same brilliant qualities. In fact, both of them are real outliers in the electric SUV class. But while that might be a problem for the Elroq, having a direct rival offer so many of the same strengths as this car itself, it's at least good for car buyers to have a choice of two fantastic electric SUVs. And if you go for an Elroq, you are getting an SUV that's comfortable, practical, nice inside, fantastic value. In fact, it's difficult to think of a box that this doesn't tick. Thanks very much for watching this review. If you want to see another one, then click up there. Make sure you subscribe to our channel as well. And to read much more about the Elroq and every other car around, click on that link to go to whatcar.com.